What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, two major brand new platforms that the Thomas Take Sports Podcast resides on. And I'm so thankful that the podcast has continued to grow, and it is on all the big platforms, and it is continuing to grow. So I just wanted to start off by saying that, as well as this is the UFC 239 recap. Yesterday, I was on the podcast, and I talked specifically about who I thought would win these fights and why. And for the most part, I was pretty, hitting the nail on the head, as far as how these fighters could win. As far as my fight picks, I was rooting for Ben Askren. I like Ben Askren. I think he's funny. I think he's quirky, and I think he was good for the UFC. And it was tough to see him go down like that, but it was a beautiful display by Jorge Masvidal. We'll get to that a little bit later, but great night of fights all around. And what you can come to expect from me in shows like these, if you've never listened to one before, is just pure post-fight reactions. My take on each and every fight from last night's fight card. And if my voice sounds a little bit hoarse, and if I sound a little bit under the weather, your boy had quite a few drinks last night, and I'm in recovery right now. I'm in recovery mode, and this is a part of my recovery. So I got a big bottle of water next to me. I got everything locked and loaded in the brain. And let's get to it. UFC 239, you had John Jones and Thiago Santos in the main event for the UFC light heavyweight title. Co-main event, you had Amanda Nunes versus Holly Holm for the women's bantamweight title. And you had a number one contenders fight with Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren. Then you had a big fight between Jan Blachowicz and Luke Rockhold. And to start the main card, you had Diego Sanchez versus Michael Chiesa. Diego, he's been around a long time. Michael Chiesa also has been around quite a bit. Both fighters, Ultimate Fighter winners. And really, Michael Chiesa put on a great grappling display in that fight. And I thought Diego Sanchez, for as good a wrestler as he is, an underrated wrestler in particular, I thought it was a big mistake for him to just kind of shoot in right away. Did not expect that. Thought he would go toe-to-toe a little bit, try to go toe-to-toe as much as he could, and then go from there and work some sort of a, big punch or something like that. So that's what I thought Diego would do. And to see him kind of go right for that takedown right out of the gate, I was a little bit shocked by that. Did not expect that. But I think in hindsight, 2020, as always, that was really what Diego Sanchez's downfall was in that fight. Michael Chiesa has two straight wins at welterweight over two notable names, Carlos Condit and Diego Sanchez. So good for him. We'll see what he can parlay that into in his next fight at welterweight. Moving onward and upward from that, Jan Blachowicz versus Luke Rockhold. This was Luke Rockhold's UFC light heavyweight debut, former UFC middleweight champion. So he's moving up from 185 pounds to 205 pounds. And a lot of people were saying that if Luke Rockhold can run through Jan Blachowicz, that he would, get a title shot possibly, which I thought was really crazy. Obviously, he's a name. Obviously, he's had success in his career before. But really, Luke Rockhold, what a fall it has been for Luke Rockhold. And I hate to kick a man while he's down, but just in terms of where we thought he was going to be, who we thought he was going to be, the way he thought of himself. As I take my first swig of water here, who he thought of himself, what he thought of himself, he was far from the athlete that he thought he was. And I hate to, as I said, I hate to kick a man while he's down. But really, he thought that moving up to 205 would be a better weight division, that he would have a better ability to take a punch, and he did not. So I think that chin is gone. He suffered some very vicious knockouts at the hands of Vitor Belfort, Michael Bisping, Yoel Romero, and now Jan Blachowicz. And I'd like to say that I think 5 of his career losses are all via knockout. I think that is something I'd like to throw out there too. Maybe I'm wrong on that, and I can't remember who it is that I'm missing in terms of somebody that has knocked him out. But let's see here. Former two-time world champion, also Strikeforce middleweight champ. It's very tough to see that, and I'm not really much of a Luke fan, but yes, all 5 losses were via knockout. Jan Blachowicz, Yoel Romero, Michael Bisping, Vitor Belfort, and Tony Rubalcaba. Melee on the Mountain, November 6, 2007. So that was a long time ago. But, I mean, this is really bad. I mean, he's been knocked out viciously in 3 of his last 4 fights. His last win was against David Branch in Pittsburgh, and he almost got knocked out in that fight. So I feel bad for Luke Rockhold. I feel like he should retire, and Dana White has hinted at that specifically, saying that that he thinks he should retire. He's got a lot of money. He's got a modeling career with Ralph Lauren. I'd like to think that that's it for him, because that was a real huge loss for Luke Rockhold. And Jan Blachowicz, a big victory for him, probably the biggest in his career, who's been a mainstay in this division for quite some time. Drawing it up, you'd think that Jan Blachowicz was slower, wasn't elusive enough, wasn't athletic enough to beat a guy like Luke Rockhold, but he sure as hell was powerful enough. And he's won 5 of his last 6 fights, 2 via decision and 3 via finish. So good for him. His last loss was to Thiago Santos in February of this year. So for him to get back into the win column, that was huge. And maybe he'll be next for the title, or in the conversation at the very least. So I think Luke should retire, and really the cockiness of Luke Rockhold, I think, is his biggest downfall. I feel like he doesn't really know how to market himself and talks the talk, but doesn't really walk the walk. And I know he was a world champ, but he never defended the title, lost the title on 17 days' notice. It's been a rough go for that guy, a rougher go than he even realizes. And I think that's unfortunate, because I think he's a great fighter. I just think mentally he's just not quite there. So that's just how I see it. Moving forward, onward, and upward, UFC 239. Next fight on the card was Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren. And this fight lasted all but 5 seconds. Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren talked a lot of trash to one another before this fight took place. And you have 2 guys that love to talk the talk and love to walk the walk, and have walked the walk to this. At this very time yesterday, Ben Askren was undefeated, had never lost. And for him to go out there and lose the way he did, this has to be a truly devastating loss for Ben Askren. But every time you step in there, there's a 50% chance that you win. There's a 50% chance that you lose. And Ben Askren came out, and Jorge Masvidal knew right away what he was going to do. He knew that Ben Askren was going to shoot. Ben Askren shoots. Jorge Masvidal throws a flying knee. It lands, and that's it. All she wrote. Just that simple sequence could end a fight in that devastating of fashion. And that's one of the best. I will put this on the record right now. Been watching this sport for over 15 years. That is one of the best knockouts I have ever seen, if not the best knockout in UFC history. It's the fastest, and it might actually be the best, because the way Jorge Masvidal approached that fight, he fooled Ben Askren. He had his hands behind his back. He was talking, and then just all of a sudden to throw an hellacious knee to the dome of Ben Askren. and then to throw the follow-up punches, and then to do the imitation of how Ben Askren was knocked out. Is that my style? Do I like to see that? No, but I definitely understood it, and it made that moment that much more entertaining, so I can't really complain about that. Jorge Masvidal is getting a lot of backlash about that simple fact, and I don't really understand it. He goes out there, he does what he needs to do, he does his job, and throws that flying knee, finishes his opponent, comes out fresh as a daisy. Jorge Masvidal could fight next week if he wanted to. More on that a little bit later, but Jorge Masvidal, that was the best performance of his career, his coming out party. And I think that, the fact that he acted the way he did after the finish, I'm not really that shocked by it. I really don't care about it. I really just care about what's next for Jorge Masvidal, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Co-main event, you had Amanda Nunes versus Holly Holm, a great matchup, a tactical matchup, one that puts one fighter with a particular set of skills against another fighter with a particular set of skills, and I thought Holly was doing her thing. I thought she was looking good. I thought she was landing good leg kicks, landing a few good oblique kicks, but I think maybe she threw a few too many, and that's what allowed Amanda Nunes to somewhat read her and get a read on her and land that big kick that she landed that led to the TKO. So is there any women's fighter ever in the history of women's mixed martial arts that's better than Amanda Nunes? There's not. That's the answer. She's the greatest female mixed martial artist of all time. She's finished Miesha Tate, she's finished Ronda Rousey, and she finished Holly Holm long ago, not too long ago, I should say. Those three were looked at as the pillars of that division, and Amanda Nunes came along and she knocked out all of them. So good for her, and she also knocked out Chris Cyborg, so that just really cements her as the best of the best. Word on the street is that Amanda Nunes wants to fight Cyborg again. She wants to get that name on her resume one more time. I think that fight could happen. Maybe sometime in the fall, maybe sometime in the winter time. That would be a good opportunity for Amanda Nunes, maybe to fight at that MSG card, as they always try to stack those cards with 3 title fights if possible. So I look forward to that very much so. The possibility of that fight happening again. But really, do I see it going any other way? Do I see anybody beating Amanda Nunes? No, I don't. Really, the only chick that I think could ever give her trouble is Kat Zingano, and she's so far out of the picture right now, with all due respect, that I don't ever see that rematch happening for Kat. Kat actually owns a win over Amanda Nunes from back in the day, and she fought her very well, fought her at her own game, beat her at her own game, and also beat her at her game. So that was a good fight for Kat Zingano, and I think that still is a good fight for Kat Zingano, because really, Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm, they've never put Amanda Nunes where she has trouble. They've never been able to get her down, and Miesha Tate was basically out-strengthened by Amanda Nunes. Ronda Rousey was a fighter with no soul, and Holly Holm, she got caught. Chris Cyborg fought like a Tasmanian devil and paid the price. So I'm not dismissing Amanda Nunes at all by saying any of those things. She is the greatest women's mixed martial artist of all time, and I think she is one of the best MMA fighters ever, regardless of gender, regardless of male or female. I think that distinction should not even be used when talking about Amanda Nunes. She is great. She's great for the UFC. She's great for the sport of mixed martial arts. And I love watching her fight. She's a great fighter. So onward and upward, moving on to the main event of the evening. Jon Jones, Thiago Santos. This was, for all intents and purposes, a much, much better fight than I thought it would be. I thought going in that Jon Jones would make this an Anthony Smith-esque fight. And in some ways he did. Now, there's some controversy here because of the fact that the judges, as they rendered their decision, as Bruce Buffer read the scorecards, it says split decision victory for Jon Jones. And For as many good things as Thiago Santos did, he showed a lot of toughness, a lot of determination in there. He was a worthy title challenger, which was I wouldn't say a real question mark, but a lot of people thought that he had no chance in this fight. And he came to prove that he did have a chance. He did have a chance to win, that he could hang with Jon Jones. And boy, did he ever hang with Jon Jones. He went the distance, and he got the decision on one of the judges' scorecards, on one of the 3 judges' scorecards. So that's a huge feather in his cap. He has nothing to be ashamed of, other than the fact that he really wanted that win. I bet you more than anybody wanted that win for him. Thiago Santos wanted that win for himself. And the fact that he didn't get it was very disappointing for him. But I can go on to say that man, that guy has nothing to be ashamed of. He climbed the ladder. He got his shot. And made the most of it. Despite the defeat, I felt like he made the most of that title shot opportunity. You have such a short window as a fighter to maintain your excellence. And Thiago Santos peaked at the perfect time as a 35-year-old fighter. I would like to think that he will get another title shot somewhere down the line, maybe not an immediate rematch. Because really, the fact that this was a split decision, I don't disagree with that. But I did feel like Jon Jones won the fight. And I probably would have given him a 48-47 score. The second round was a tough one to score because Thiago Santos at one point might have been a slip rather than a knockdown. And if the judges scored that as a knockdown, that's the 1 point difference right there. That one fell swoop, 1 point difference right there is the difference in the fight. But realistically, I did not think this fight was as close as people thought. It was close, but I thought Jon Jones won is what I'm trying to say. And I thought that Jon Jones, again, for as brutal a puncher as Thiago Santos is, Jon Jones was really able to neutralize that offense. He really didn't get hit with a lot of punches. He got hit with a lot of kicks. He had to be carried out of the octagon. His leg was busted up. But outside of that, he pretty much neutralized Thiago Santos, and I thought it was a win for him. And really, we're really starting to get into the discussion of Jon Jones being the greatest ever. And I hold the distinction, I've always held the distinction that George St. Pierre is the best ever. I hold that in my heart of hearts. I believe George is the best ever. He beat them all, fought them all, and avenged both of his losses, won 2 titles in 2 different weight classes after a 4-year layoff, mind you, against a tough, durable Michael Bisping. I think that was really the cherry on top of his legacy. But Jon Jones he's really special. He's a really special fighter. All joking aside about his personal life, I would really hope and pray that is behind him, because Jon Jones is such a special fighter, a once-in-a-lifetime generational talent, the likes of which this sport has never seen. I think he's the greatest talent that the sport of mixed martial arts has ever had, and I don't think that is an overstatement. There's been a lot of great fighters throughout these last few years. Conor McGregor is one of those guys, obviously. But, Jon Jones is Jon Jones. He's the best fighter in the world. He's never lost. So how do you say that he's worse than someone when he's never lost to date? Nobody has beat him, and I don't know if anybody ever will. He finds a way to neutralize every opponent that he's ever fought. And sometimes he's even beaten them at their own game. He's a truly remarkable athlete, a truly remarkable fighter, and I love watching him fight. I'm very thankful that he is fighting and he's back and he's winning, and he's great for the sport as a fighter. As long as he keeps his personal affairs, in good standing, just focus on your fighting career, focus on your wife, focus on your kids. Don't get mixed up with the bad seeds. It's so much easier said than done to do that, especially when you're Jon Jones. You really got to put yourself in his shoes. He was a 21, 22-year-old UFC champ. It's pretty tough, to put a stranglehold on that spotlight. But I feel like John Jones has matured a lot, and I look forward to seeing him fight again. I would like to think that he will fight sometime in December. If anybody, I don't know who would be next for John. Anthony Smith is a possibility in a rematch. He just beat Alexander Gustafsson via finish, so that could be a possibility. The DC 3 fight is a possibility. I don't think it'll happen, but if enough fans want it, it will happen because the UFC puts on the fights that the fans want to see. Jan Blachowicz with his knockout over Luke Rockhold, maybe he's next. It's very tough, very tough. Johnny Walker's out there. He's a big name. Bektik is out there who had a big knockout over Jimmy Manawa. There's some names out there, some good fighters out there, and some good challenges for John Jones. And I think the moral of the story of this main event is don't look at these fighters in this light heavyweight division as also-rans or as bums. There's some good names in this division that John Jones is just... Excuse me. John Jones is just that good. I mean, we're talking about a dude that beat Daniel Cormier not once but twice. He's special. He's a special fighter. And as far as what's next, I think that any of those options are available. For Jorge Masvidal, coming off of this 5-second knockout of Ben Askren, coming off the knockout of Darren Till, he better, excuse me, he better get that title shot against Kamaru Usman. I know Colby won the interim title, but obviously he's got to fight with Lawler. That's a big fish to fry. I think you gotta go the direction of Usman Masvidal. That's the fight that I think needs to happen, and I think Usman would win that, but I think Masvidal is a very tough and dangerous opponent, and I want to give him his spotlight, okay? I want to give him his shine because he deserves it. So let's dive in to Jorge Masvidal. We're going to dive into his career for just a moment. It's really just put this in perspective for people. I don't believe they understand quite the distinction that he has. He now not only does he hold the quickest knockout in UFC history, but this guy has been around for such a long time, and he's fought some names that are some of the biggest in the sport. I go back to when he fought originally in let's see when he made his debut. I mean, he's been fighting since 2003. He's been active for 16 years. This guy is not just some new guy. And it's crazy to say that. He's 34 years old, so if he fought in 2003, 16 years ago, he made his pro debut at the age of 18. So that just goes to show you how much of a badass this guy is. And I look forward to seeing him fight for a title. Some of the names that he's fought Rafael the Sun Sao at Full Throttle 1 back in April of 2005 in Duluth, Georgia. Joe Lozon, he fought 9 days later in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Finished him via TKO. Went to a decision with Rafael Assunção in 2005, April 21st. 9 days later, he fights Joe Lozon. That was back in the wild, wild west days of the sport. Fights guys that don't even have Wikipedia pages, and Paul Rodriguez, David Gardner, and Nuri Shakur. Fights Keith Wisniewski in Bodog. Bodog was a shooting star for a moment. Fleeting star, I guess you could say. Fights Eve Edwards. That's his first real big win back in July of 2007 in Trenton, New Jersey. That was at lightweight. He's bounced around. Fought at the Strikeforce Playboy Mansion event back in September of 2007. And boy, I mean, this card, the light heavyweight title was on the line, or the light heavyweight fight was the main event. Bobby Southworth versus Bill Mahood, Gilbert Melendez versus Tetsu Kako, Joe Riggs versus Eugene Jackson. I mean, there was some... Dewey Cooper fought on that fight card. Dewey Cooper's been a coach for a while. He fought on the prelims of that card. So that just puts in perspective. I mean, this guy has been around for forever. He fought Ryan Healy, Pat Healy's brother, and fought some names. Paul Daly, he lost a unanimous decision to at Shark Fights 13. Main event of that fight card was Trevor Prangley and Keith Jardine. I mean, this is crazy. Really is. Fought KJ Nunes, fought Gilbert Melendez, Tim Means, Michael Chiesa. He submitted him via Darce choke, fought Pat Healy, fought Ali Quinta at lightweight. That was a very controversial decision win for Ali Quinta. I thought Jorge won that fight. Fights Ben Henderson to a split decision. Fights Lorenz Larkin to a split decision. Some really tough luck losses here. And fights Ross Pearson, beats him. Fights Jake Ellenberger, knocks him out. Knocks out Donald Cerrone. Then has Damian Maia as a backpack for 15 minutes. That was the UFC 211 card. That was Stipe versus Junior Dos Santos. That was Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Jessica Andrade. Loses his fight to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson at UFC 217. That was the Bisping GSP card. Then he comes back in March to fight to fight Darren Till, and knocks him out. Then fights Ben Askren, knocks him out. So he's had 47 fights. 47 fights, 34 wins, 15 of which are by knockout, 17 of which are by decision. He's had 13 losses in 47 fights, 10 of which are by decision, 2 by submission. He's been knocked out 1 time in his career. And the dude that knocked him out was Rodrigo Dam, who has not competed in mixed martial arts since 2015. He finished with a career record of 12-9. So this MMA game is odd, folks. This MMA game, it honestly, it makes no sense. But that's why I love it. The MMA math is such a unique algorithm that it just makes it interesting. It makes it so much more entertaining. But I'm excited for this kid. I'm excited for this guy. He deserves all the fame. He deserves all the exposure. He's been around the block. He's been around a long time. And these stories where these vets get these shining moments, like a Michael Bisping, it is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. And even guys like Chael Sonnen back in the day, I remember he really had to work his way back up. I talked about that in the Chael Sonnen in-depth episode. And Jorge Masvidal, man, he's the star of the night, I think. Outshining John Jones, outshining everyone on the card with that 5-second knockout, the fastest knockout in UFC history. And realistically, I think that it was quicker than that. It was quicker than that. That was just when the ref came in and stopped it. You know, and that's the thing. The timing on these fights is always like 3 or 4 seconds behind. And I wish they could fix that. But it is what it is. Fight ends when it stopped. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, my UFC 239 post-fight reaction. You'll follow me on Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take. Follow me on Instagram at Ryan Thomas Take. And also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. It's everywhere. and I really appreciate the love and support. Have a great day, everybody.